Hi,
Hey, it's so
how
much
are
fun
you?
seeing you, Zibby.
You too, Dr. Koplewicz.
Yes, and you look very healthy. You said you
Oh,
were
thanks.
floundering. You look tan and robust, and things are
Oh,
good.
thank you. Robust, yes. Lots of cookies making me more robust. But
I
thank
have to
you.
tell you, the Child Mind Institute's doing this campaign called hashtag We Thrive Inside. And, I think we should all try to thrive inside mentally, inside our heads, inside the house. But this is very challenging. When Cynthia McFadden asked me the question while we we're on the Today Show, I said, is the camera rolling? And she said, I'll stop it. And I said, well, this feels like the shoemaker's children. This is and the shoemaker's children didn't have any shoes. It is very hard, I think, to not flounder, to be able to keep structure, to be able to say every morning, I'm going to get up, I'm going to shave, I'm going to go have breakfast, and then I'm going to start my day. And for kids who are, for parents who have two jobs, who are now homeschooling their kids and doing something else, they have to provide remarkable structure for their children. Also, it wasn't enough that you had two jobs before. I guess maybe you even have three jobs because you now become your child's teacher as well. So this is unprecedented, and it's going to be very. I think it's really important for us all to look for that silver lining, because otherwise it could be totally overwhelming.
Well, what's the silver lining?
So I know I do see silver lining. So first of all, from a child psychiatrist point of view,
Yes.
I do believe that crises like this will bring on change. So for instance, typically we know it's 1 out of 5 kids in America have a mental health disorder. And I don't believe that people are empathetic enough, sympathetic, understanding about how real, common, and treatable these disorders are. But right now, everyone in America, 5 out of 5 people in America, are having mental health symptoms. They don't have a mental health disorder, but they do understand what demoralization is like. They feel depressed. They feel like they're in mud. It feels like an endless marathon that we're going through. The end of, the light at the end of the tunnel is very challenging. We have to kind of live in the moment. And I believe that once we get to a new normal, people will have a better understanding and more compassion for people who live with these kind of disorders every day. So that would be one light. The other light is for young kids. I think you have to think about the different ages, but kids under 5, this is wonderful. They're with their mom and dad all the time. They're not going off to daycare or school or something. They get to play and be with their parents. I think 5 to 12-year-olds more challenging because they have real work they have to do. And and yet they still get their parents around. And I think we forget how much our children love having us around. I think the people who are suffering the most are teenagers and college age students. They are losing chunks of their lives that they're never going to get back. And if you're a really good parent, you're very honest with them and you say, this does suck. This is awful. It's not life or death, but it's terrible. And your experience is worse than mine because my life will go on. This is a blip. But you'll never get back your senior prom, and you won't get back the graduation, and you won't get, the casual hookups or the whispers in the ear. Or, someone was telling me how online education in a college is so different that if you're sitting next to someone in a lecture hall that you don't even know, and the professor is completely obtuse, and you lean over and say, do you understand a word this guy is saying? And the person says, no, I don't, or I do. And then afterwards you have a cup of coffee and they try to explain it to you. You lose all that kind of intimate kind of learning experience, social experience has just disappeared. And that's going to be a semester or a year. And I feel for them. And I feel also for the kids in high school who, the ability to move away from your parents, which is what adolescence is all about, is separating. All of a sudden you can't do that. It's too dangerous. So I think that for most kids, there's silver lining, and for parents, there's silver lining. The only problem, I have adult children, and I love my adult children, but frankly, I don't want to eat dinner with them every night. It's like I thought it was, I was looking for Sunday night dinners, which I hardly ever got. And now it's like, really? I love you, but every night for dinner, and who knew
That's right.
about washing dishes and that bottom sheet on a king size bed, it's really it's a challenge. So, but I think also laughing. I think, and by the way, I think your podcast is perfect in the respect of the Instagram interview, because books have become so important. I mean, don't watch cable news. Whatever you do, there's nothing new on cable news that's going to make you feel good. And yet, when you read a book, I've always loved fiction. because it's like making a movie. You cast the characters, the scenery looks the way it is in your head. It's such a total and complete escape. And I do think there, you know, what mindfulness is all about is the idea of being in the moment. Well, reading a book is just the total being in the moment. I mean, isn't that would be terrific. So the fact that there's so many of us who don't have time to read, and that you give us these little, you know, teases that says, you know, you can really read this book is really important, Zibby. I really mean.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it certainly helped me. It's like if I can spend an hour, there's nothing more relaxing for me and more that allows me to sort of reset more than reading a book. So I don't know. But in terms of kids, because I feel like, you know, my own issues with this situation are just exacerbated examples of issues that I always have with everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, I might be anxious, but I know how to deal with anxiety. I've been anxious my whole life. But for my kids, I feel like it's a different story. And from a lot of other parents who I talk to, some kids are really going through a hard time. And as you pointed out at our board meeting, a lot of times those parents would be seeking treatment right now, but they're not, because
Right.
there's so many bigger things to deal with, right? Than just like, my kid isn't sleeping, or my kid is so anxious they're XYZ, or they're depressed, or they're starting to grind their teeth. I don't know what. So what should we as parents do? And all the friends of mine who express that like their kids are exhibiting more signs, but like what then? What do you do?
So I would tell you that I think, as I just said, everyone's affected by this. So there's 60% of the population that is really typically developing, happy-go-lucky. You know, they're really these healthy, resilient kids. No matter what you do to them, they just seem to be robust and resilient. All of those kids are suffering too, because maybe their father lost their job, or their mother lost their job, or they're worried about their grandmother's health. They don't have school to go to. So they are definitely showing symptoms, not mental health disorders, but symptoms. You have 15% of the population that's subclinical, meaning that they have some symptoms, but they never have enough distress or dysfunction to get some help. So maybe they're a little more worried than the average kid, or a little more inattentive, or a little more moody. Those kids, you add stress and strain, you make them more symptomatic. And then you have the 20% of the population that have real common treatable disorders. And then 5% is left over. Those are the kids who are very severe, like schizophrenia or low functioning autism, where they don't have language. And those kids typically wouldn't be affected by this because they're either emotionally or cognitively not in touch enough. But the supply chain has been affected. So they're not getting their meds from the pharmacy. Their day treatment programs or social programs have been disbanded. So now all of a sudden a parent is noticing symptoms that they never noticed before. And so I think, number one, you need parent resources. So what we've been doing at the Child Mind Institute is literally having a daily Facebook Live. We do it at 4:30, and it really surprises me that we might get 8,000 or 11,000 views, and then by the end of 2 or 3 days, 237,000 views. So parents are looking for information. So it's maybe 5 or 10 minutes about a topic, managing your anxiety, or working with a kid with ADHD at homeschooling. But I think it's the same questions at the end. You know, how do I make sure there's bedtime? Structure, structure, structure. How do I calm myself down without agitating my child? And so being able to have this free, but also very scientifically sound resource is good. But I think also we've gone to telehealth, so that if you really, are worried, we have a flat rate kind of phone consultation. Get on the phone, spend a half an hour with the doctor, and talk to them. And they very quickly will tell you, this is within the normal range, this is a few tricks and tips that you can use, or this is more worrisome. And as challenging as it is, you're going to have to go on a screen to get your evaluation instead of meeting the doctor in person. But I think that, you know, we have to get used to this new normal. And while I wish I could tell you that tomorrow we're coming out of this, and I think in a month we might open the doors to the Child Mind Institute in California and New York, I think it's going to be a new normal. Do you mean we're trying to develop now clear masks because a kid wants to see the doctor's lips move, right? And are we going to be able to have as many children in the room? And how are we going to do this? And so telehealth is not going anywhere. So I think that parents are going to need this. The other thing we developed, by the way, is tutoring. You know, we figured let's do a flat rate tutoring, because there are certain kids who just can't do distance learning. They needed that attention from the teacher. They needed that focus, that that engagement, and they just can't get it off the screen. I think I told you that my wife is a school teacher, and she teaches middle school art. And she says that some of the boys in fifth grade move around so much that they go in and out of the screen. Every once in a while they actually fall off the chair. And my wife called one of them afterwards and said, Jason, what's the matter? And he said, Miss Zero, I have focus problems and I'm not taking my focus pills. And she said, okay, can we get a chair that doesn't have wheels on it? Can we, And my thought was, if this kid is having trouble with art, 29 minutes of art, what happens for him with history and with math and science? And so we're going to find that there's going to be lots of kids who have fallen behind. And this summer, it's almost, we're trying to figure out, how do you have academic boot camp that will be more individual online or maybe in person with social distancing? But we're going to have to be very innovative to be able to address the fact that a lot of American kids are going to fall behind academically because of this new way of teaching.
Wow. So in terms of what ChildMind, for people who aren't as familiar with ChildMind, what ChildMind can offer, not only do you have the telehealth, or I know I'm on the board, so I can say we, but I'll say you. You have the telehealth options. You have the daily Facebook Lives at 4:30. You obviously have the most amazing website ever with, like, I have Googled everything under the sun on your website to try to, diagnose whatever. And, it's just an amazing resource in and of itself for childmind.org. What am I leaving out? What should people know?
There's actually a parenting tip every day.
That's true. Yes, I get that. Yes.
It's a video parenting tip. And right now, for the next few weeks, every day we Thrive Inside. And so on Friday, it was Mark Ronson, the record producer,
yes.
Who grew up, by the way, in Manhattan and went to collegiate and was a DJ. But it's really interesting to hear his story, how he made a chart, and he puts on the chart that he has coffee, and he has a chart every day that he takes a shower and that he takes a walk, and that structure that he needs for himself. And he doesn't have kids, but it's interesting to listen to, how people are really, Octavia Spencer talked about the fact that she's trying to learn new things. The funny line was that she said, I've decided to learn how to cook. She said, you would think I'd gone down that road before, but it's really taking on a challenge, and being able to listen to other people who look good, they're movie stars, and they're being very authentic and real about what the struggle is like. And I think it's also good for kids, because I think we underestimate how some of the kids are saying, and I would strongly recommend that we do bite-sized pieces, let's just get through this week. Let's just do one more week, So we're there,
And
we started
tell
to
me
realize
about, you said there's the, oh. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we started to realize the ChildMind Institute's here for your child during this crisis and beyond, because this crisis is going to leave damage. We're going to have kids with more anxiety symptoms than ever before. We're going to have children who have post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, one of the things we just started on Thursday, Zibby, was a parent helpline for any first responder or anyone who works at the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation. So that's all those public hospitals, Bellevue, Elmhurst, which is the epicenter in New York of this COVID, Jacoby. And so these are parents, or grandparents, and they work all day long. They're taking their lives in their hands, whether they're a doctor or a janitor or a nurse or a ward clerk, and they should be able to get a free, to be able to talk to someone and say, I worry about my kid, give me 30 minutes to really understand it. And if they need a second or a third visit, they should see the same clinician. They shouldn't have to start the story all over again. And the fact that, we offering 1,000 calls a month, we think that other first responders are going to want this also, whether they're firemen or EMTs, because these are people who, you just heard that one of these nurses ended her own life. I mean, you can't work like this with this kind of pressure without a valve, without someone saying, and our hope would be that parents would feel comfortable asking about their kid. And then once they're asking about their kid, we could offer them some support also.
That's great. And you have a book coming out, you mentioned.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love the fact that I hope you'll invite me back when the book comes out. And seeing, the excitement, this is my first book, but the excitement of seeing what the pages look like on, the typeface. It's called The Scaffold Effect, Raising Resilient and Robust Children in an Age of Anxiety. Now, it was written pre-COVID, but it's very appropriate. And the whole concept, by the way, that helicoptering and concierge parents and snowplow parenting doesn't build strength. And if you want to build strength, your kid has a learning disability, a scaffold is a tutor or some remediation. Or if your child is very shy, it might be some therapy. Or if your child has a gift and is athletic, it's getting them the right tennis instructor or the right baseball program. But then you pull away the scaffolding. So while you're building the child, you're putting this up. And if a child buys into this, they know when to ask for scaffolding themselves. So when they get to college, they might need extra time, or they might need the writing center, or they might need to still see a therapist. That's what we want. We want to build independent kids who recognize when they could use some help and when they can do it on their own and they can persevere. So that's what the book's about. And it uses a whole bunch of vignettes from the Child Mind Institute, from clinicians there. And the one thing they wanted us to do, this is Random House Harmony, was to use our own vignettes as parents. So I decided to do that and not ask my son's permission. I figured I'll ask for an apology, apologize afterwards, because inevitably you make mistakes. You hopefully learn from the mistakes that you made when you were a parent. And whether it's that you overdid it or you underdid it, or your child challenges you in a way that you thought, really, I didn't think I was going to have to do this, and I think that gives people, first of all, it humbles you. And secondly, I think it makes it easier for someone to read that they're not being preached to. They're talking to someone who's a doctor, but also a parent.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well,
So,
thank you so much for coming on today, and thanks for all the
good to see
tips.
you.
And
Zibby,
you
it's good to
too.
see you. Yes.
Good to see you too.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.